Hey man, how's it going? So what I'm going to do is go through part by part of the song Awake by Godsmack. I haven't tabbed it out yet, but hopefully if this video is helpful enough I won't need to. So I have it set up right here. I'm going to play it and then we'll go over each part. I'll do the solo in a separate video if you want to learn the solo. Right now this is just going to be a focus on the rhythm guitar, so we'll go through it piece by piece. And I'll break it down slowly. So here's the intro. So the intro is 3 chords. By the way, we're in a drop C tuning. So I have a open C chord here. The lower note being low C, G, C, F, A, and D. So if I fret the guitar with my second finger on the G string, 2nd fret, and my third finger on the 3rd fret of the B string, I get a full C chord. So that's your typical open drop tuning chord. So right away we start out with this progression that's 3 chords. And it consists of this open chord, and then we're doing a bar chord here on the very 1st fret of the A string. So I have a 1st fret on the A, well, the G technically, but I'll refer to the strings as standard tuning strings. So the 2nd string here, the A string, 1st fret, the 3rd fret of the D string, and the 3rd fret of the G string. So that's the chord that we're forming. So the first chord again is this open C, and then up here to this chord, and then where my first finger is, we're going to drop right down to the very first string here, and I'm barring the first 3. So when you're barring a chord, you're just laying your finger down across 1 fret. So I'm going to be barring the first 3 strings of this 1st fret. So that's my 3rd chord. So altogether we have the 3. And then the strumming pattern you can figure out however you're comfortable playing it. It seems to me that they're doing some sort of consistent pattern, but it'll suffice to just play each chord the way, in the order of the chords, so you could just play them. And they seem to be doing something like... So those are the 3 chords. Now this is the intro of the song, but this progression is going to come back later on in the song as well. So we'll hang on to that. Another thing to take note of is while this chord progression is going on, the other guitar part is playing this line. So what he's doing is he's playing octaves. Now octaves, in case you're unfamiliar, are 2 of the same note that are, one is low, one is high. Typically you have 8 notes in a scale. The 1st and the 8th note are an octave. They are the same note, just one is the lower, one is the higher. So he's playing here. My index finger is on the 5th fret of the A string, and my pinky finger is on the 7th fret of the G. So if you can hear, they're the same note. That's an octave, right? So he's playing it starting on the 5th fret, and the strumming pattern is exactly the same as the chord progression. So starting on the 5th fret here, he's going to slide down keeping this shape, by the way. Notice that when we're playing this octave, I'm skipping a string, right? I'm fretting the 5th in the A, skipping the D, and then fretting the 7th fret of the G. So skipping a string and also going 2 notes over. That's just the nature of octaves on this string. So I'm going to hold this shape and slide it down to the 1st fret. So now I have 1st fret on the A string, and my pinky is on the 3rd fret of the G string. Again, same note. And notice the same shape as well. And then one more slide. We're going to slide up to the 6th fret. So I have my first finger on the 6th fret of the A, and my pinky is on the 8th fret of the G. Same note again. So this is played in the same strumming pattern and the same progression as the chords are. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then the same way 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So that is the 2 guitar parts that are happening in the introduction. So that's what's going on. So we'll move on. And again, I know this is just the first video, so if any of this is unclear, let me know and I'll go over any of these parts in detail. And I mean that for the rest of the song as well. If anything is unclear, I'll delve more into it. This is just a very brief introductory video. So, next riff. So this is the pre-verse. So right away we have this, and this is an open C chord, right? The bottom 3 strings that's where you're gonna get your easy C chord. Is palm muting it, and the pattern is. So I'm going down, down, up, down. Down, down, up, down. And I'm keeping this palm mute instead of going. I'm keeping the palm down to get that muddy, muffled sound. And then you'll hear this note at the end. And what that is, this is a natural harmonic. So on the 5th fret here, just a quick introductory course on harmonics. On the 5th fret here, he's playing the D string and the G string, but he's not fretting the string. So I'm not pushing down on the fretboard. That would produce those 2 notes. And he's not fretting them. He's just laying his fingers on top of the strings. And now, with the guitar, there's a lot of natural harmonic locations, prominently in the 5th fret, the 7th fret, and the 12th fret. So what happens if you lay your finger over any string on one of those frets, and you're making contact with the string, but you're not pushing the string onto the fretboard. So, for example, I'm going to use the open C here, the low string. I'm leaving my 2nd finger on top of the fret here, but I'm not pushing down. I'm not producing that note. I'm just laying it and playing the note. So hear the difference between fretting and not fretting. This is fretting and not fretting. So those are natural harmonics, and those are natural sounds that the guitar produces. So they're doing this concept on the D string and the G string of the 5th fret. So you hear that. That's what's happening. So again, just a little bit of a, let's see if I can't do like a close-up here. So ordinarily, instead of fretting where you'd be pushing down, I'm just letting my finger rest on top of the string. So that's what he's doing here. There's a natural harmonic. So then they get into this section. And all that's happening here is the open strum in the same pattern. And then we're bringing back the octave concept. And they're starting on the 5th fret and sliding up to the 6th fret. So you get... So it's just open strumming, da 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 da, da 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 da, and then... And so they're going to repeat this concept twice, 4 times each. So the first 3 times that they play this, it's that pattern that I've been playing. Now the 4th time, instead of sliding from 5 to 6, they're sliding from 5 to 8. Same concept, but they're still octaves, same string, just instead of sliding 1 fret up, you're sliding 3. So it would sound like that. And then they repeat that part. And then we get to the next part. Now this note is... And this note is... imagine you're playing the octave shape, and you slide up to the 8th fret here on the A string, 10th fret on the G. Although now, ordinarily you wouldn't be playing this D string note in between the octave, you're just playing the octave notes. But now they're going to, if you can see my, I'm only using my first finger and my pinky finger, and I have these two free, my middle and my ring. So the middle finger is actually going to come down and fret on the D string in the 9th fret. So just to reiterate, I have my first finger on the 8th, my pinky on the 10th of the G, and there's one string in between those notes that I'm going to fret now on the 9th with my middle finger. So I altogether have 8, then 9, then 10. So the ending of that part is... And that's the chord. Now they're going to go into the verse of the song. And the verse of the song is the easiest part of the song because it's just 2 open strums and then 2 more chords, but it's exactly the same as the intro. So it sounds like this. So that should sound similar to the intro because it pretty much is, just with a different pattern. You just have... just playing the open notes in. And then the... right at the end of that is... which, if you'll remember, is the same as the introduction chords. And they play that a few times, so that's the verse. This part is exactly the same as the intro, just with singing involved. So you have your strumming again. And then this is a repeated part again with the palm muting, right? And then the harmonics. And then we're back to this pre-verse riff. So same idea, strumming, octaves, those are a big part of the entire song. And remember that chord, right? That chord. And then they go back to this super simple verse that mimics the intro. hopefully so far so good. These riffs are all very related. They're all very related to one another. There's not a lot of crazy stuff going on. Once you're grasping the concept of the three main chords of the song, as well as the octave concept, once you have those two, you've essentially you've learned everything so far. So they're just going to play through that same pattern before we get to the bridge. So that'll come up soon. And this is just like the intro, which is just the three chords, if you remember. Now, they're going to repeat the chorus, and if you can hear over top of those chords, if you can hear over top of those chords, it's the octave thing again. So, nothing new, right? This is all, we're 2.5 minutes into the song, almost halfway through the song, and they're just recycling riffs right now, which is fine, but, I mean, once we've learned, the basic few, we've got most of the song done. So it's only until we get to the bridge where things actually start to change. So here we have this new pattern that's been introduced. This is the bridge pattern. It's going to follow through to the rest of the song, and the song is even going to end on this pattern. So a lot of times when I'm doing breakdown patterns, I consider this to be a breakdown pattern because there's syncopation involved, and we'll talk about that stuff later. But essentially what you have is three groups: a group of 4, a group of 5, and a group of 2. And that's what comprises the pattern. So you have 4, 5, and then 2. So when you play them in succession with the rests involved, the gaps in between, you get this riff, which is... So when they introduce this riff, it's not palm muted, right? In the beginning it's just... And by the way, what I'm doing here is I'm playing this low C string without palm muting it, but I'm getting the break with my left hand here. So I'll exaggerate the movement. It looks like... So my hand is opening up when I'm playing, and then closing to cut that gap out. Otherwise you would just have... And you don't want that. That's not how the riff is played. So they introduced the riff by playing this 4-5-2 pattern with these rests. And the other guitar comes in. And then when the drums come in, same exact pattern except palm muted this time. Right? Now one thing to take note of, a lot of the times when these breakdowns are played, and not just Godsmack, I mean bands like Lamb of God, August Burns Red, hundreds and hundreds of bands that do this, when they're palm muting a breakdown riff, sometimes they're playing just the low note, sometimes they're playing the first 2 strings, sometimes 3, sometimes more. I don't really know exactly what they're doing. But keep in mind that when you're playing these breakdown patterns, you could certainly just play it on the low string, there's nothing wrong with that. You could play on the first 2, but if you try to play it, say 4 strings, it's a lot of distance that your pick has to travel to get all those notes out. And there's nothing wrong with that, except for the fact that when you're playing at a high speed or really quick successive notes, sometimes you can't afford to travel over 4 strings to get the speed and the pattern correctly. So in this case, this isn't too challenging of a breakdown. You can probably get away with playing 3 strings. And you can get a bigger chord that way. Or you could stick with just the low one. That's fine too. So that's up to you. I mean, most likely they're playing the first 2 just because it's easy to traverse and you get a good chunky chord that way. But just something to think about. So this carries on for a little while, and then they're going to introduce more chords to this. Alright, so same thing. Okay, so there's a change there, and all it is the same. Remember in the intro we played this chord on the first fret, just the bottom 3 strings, just barred on the first. That's all it is there. Just same pattern, by the way. The 4 5 2 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 1 2. Go straight back to this, and again here. Now this part, they start again on the first fret, and then they're gonna slide up to the 5th fret. Same bar. You're still playing with the bottom 3 strings and barring them. You're just gonna slide this up to the 5th. So you have this, essentially what you have is, and then they recycle that riff again. So it's, you move to the 1st fret, you play the same pattern, and you move up to the 5th fret, and you start palm muting, and you slowly release the palm mute, and just... and then it comes back into the same 4 5 2 pattern. And now there it is again, another harmonic. It's just right, 5th on the D, 5th on the G, and it goes straight back into the pattern. And this is the solo section. So the solo is going to happen with the whammy bar. Again, we can tackle the solo another time. But for now, what we're focused on is the underlying riff underneath the solo. And it's exactly the same as we just played. It's the open pattern, the 4 5 2, and then they're going to hit the 1st fret chord, and then they're eventually going to hit the 5th fret chord again. And the solo is just doing its thing. So everything you've played up until now, you're just repeating it then while the solo happens. It should be right here. So 1st fret, and then back to pattern. 1st fret, and then 5th fret. And now we segue straight back into the chorus intro riff, the same riff, which is just the 3 chords. Most likely the octaves over top. So same thing, and then they're going to repeat this, and then they're going to end on that 4 5 2 pattern. So same thing. Four, 5 2, right? So that's the song. So some things to keep in mind. A lot of the times, this is very typical of a lot of the songs in that style, in this genre. Same with Lamb of God, a lot of these other notable bands. Once you get down the necessary riffs, they tend to recycle, and if they do change, they change slightly, or there's a new bridge that's involved. But there's a common theme throughout, and we've learned through this song that the chords, these 3 chords, they were prominent throughout the entire song. The only time that they change is when we introduce this 5th fret chord here. just went back to the same open string. So hopefully this has been helpful, but keep in mind that once you've learned the basic riffs of the song, it's not like there's something new every other bar. They recycle, and they might sound different because there's a solo or a lead octave line or a new singing part or a different strumming pattern, but they're really the same riffs in essence. So hopefully this was helpful to you. Shoot me a message, let me know. I can delve into any of these parts more specifically. I can do close-ups, whatever you need that's more helpful. But hopefully this was just a good brief overview of the song. And yeah, let me know what you think. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.